Nobody noticed what was happening inside the small cabin near Bitterroot Creek. From the outside, it looked like every other homestead in the Montana Territory. Weathered pine logs, a stone chimney releasing thin smoke, a woodshed leaning against the north wall. Nothing about it suggested that something unusual was taking shape beneath the floorboards. But under that cabin, hidden from every passing eye, Sarah Hutchkins was digging for her children's lives. It was November of 1887. Winter had come early to the mountains, and the cold settled deep into the valley. Sarah was 32 years old, a widow with 2 young children. Emma was 8. Daniel was 5. Her husband, a timber cutter, had died the previous spring in a logging accident, leaving her alone with a modest cabin, unpaid debts at the general store, and a winter she was not sure they would survive. The cabin itself was solid by local standards, 14 feet by 18. Pine logs packed with chinking, a riverstone fireplace that drew well enough. The floor sat 6 inches above the ground on cedar posts. It was respectable, not comfortable, but livable, at least on paper. The problem was the cold that came from below. Every morning after late October, frost formed on the inside of the floorboards. The children woke shaking, their breath visible in the dim cabin light. Sarah wrapped them in quilts and set them near the fire while she cooked cornmeal mush, but the cold never left their bones. The earth beneath the cabin pulled heat away faster than the fire could replace it. The crawl space under the raised floor turned into a wind tunnel. At night, and the wind screamed beneath the cabin, stealing warmth through the planks. Even with the fire glowing low, water in the wash basin froze solid before morning. Sarah tried everything the neighbors suggested. She packed straw under the floor. She hung canvas around the foundation. She burned more firewood than she could afford. Nothing worked. The cold came from below, steady and unforgiving. By mid-November, Daniel developed a deep cough that would not clear. Emma's fingers turned white at the tips when she carried wood. Sarah stopped sleeping through the night. Every 2 hours she woke to feed the fire, afraid that if it died, her children would not wake again. One night, as the wind rattled the shutters, Sarah made a decision. She would dig. Not a root cellar, not a storm shelter. Something different, and a small room beneath the cabin floor where the earth itself could hold warmth. A place below the wind. A place where the ground stayed steady when the air above turned deadly cold. She did not tell anyone. Not because she wanted secrets, but because she did not want opinions. She did not want to hear why it would fail, or why it was improper, or why a woman should not dig beneath her own home. She only wanted her children warm. Before dawn the next morning, she pried up 3 floorboards in the northwest corner of the cabin, beneath the children's bed. Below them lay hard, packed soil. She took a shovel and began to dig. She worked slowly, carefully. Early in the morning and late at night, when the children slept or were busy. At first, the soil came up frozen and heavy, but 8 inches down, it softened. The earth was calmer there. Sarah was not guessing. She had thought this through. The room would be 8 feet long and 6 feet wide, just tall enough for her to sit upright. She would line the walls with riverstone to prevent collapse and to hold warmth. A narrow ladder would lead down. A small ventilation pipe would angle up through the foundation, disguised as drainage. She understood something many builders ignored. 5 feet below ground, the earth stayed the same temperature year-round. In Montana, that meant around 45 to 50 degrees. Cold, but far warmer than winter nights above ground. With heat from the cabin seeping down, the space could grow warmer without burning more wood. She did not use fancy words for it. She called it staying below the wind. The digging took 3 weeks. Sarah carried the dirt out in a canvas sack and spread it thin across her garden so no one would notice. Her hands blistered, then hardened. Her back ached. But the hole grew deeper. By early December, she could stand inside the space. She began laying stone. Rounded river rock gathered over the summer. She stacked them carefully, wedging smaller stones into the gaps so the walls would not shift. The stone felt cold now, but she knew it would hold heat once warmed. She built a small platform for bedding. She installed the ventilation pipe. She packed pine needles and bark between the stone and the earth to trap air. Then she relayed the floorboards, leaving only a small trap door hidden beneath a woven rug. From above, nothing looked different. From below, it was quiet. Still. Protected when cold night. But when the temperature dropped near 0, Sarah tested it. She climbed down with a candle and sat inside. The air was still. Slightly musty, but warm enough that her breath did not feel. It worked. She did not tell the children yet. Winter had only begun, and the worst was still coming. Sarah waited for proof. Not a mild night, not a short, cold snap. She waited for winter to show its teeth. By mid-December, people in the settlement had noticed her digging. They did not know what she had built, only that something strange was happening beneath her cabin. Old Mr. Calloway saw her hauling dirt one evening and asked if she had a drainage problem. Sarah told him she was improving the foundation. He nodded and walked on. 2 women from the church stopped by with preserved apples. One looked at the scattered soil near the garden and asked if Sarah was making a root cellar. Sarah said something like that. The women exchanged a look. It was late in the season for digging. The ground would freeze soon. At the general store, a clerk named Horace mentioned he had heard she was digging under her cabin. He warned her that foundations could shift, floors could sag. Sarah paid for her lamp oil and candles and left without explaining. No one was cruel, but no one believed in what she was doing either. On December 18th, Sarah made the move. She carried the children's bedding down into the underground room for the first time. Emma hesitated at the opening. She said it was dark. Sarah told her it was warm. Daniel climbed down first. He touched the stone wall and smiled. He said it was not cold. Sarah lit the oil lamp and helped them settle onto the platform. The air was still. No wind. No rattling boards. That night, the temperature outside dropped to 12 degrees. Inside the cabin, even near the fire, it barely reached 50. In the underground room, with the trapdoor closed, it stayed near 58. The children slept through the night without shaking. Sarah sat by the fire above them and allowed herself a small smile. But she did not relax. Winter was just getting started. The storm arrived on January 11th. It began as light snow. By afternoon, the wind drove it sideways across the valley. By nightfall, visibility dropped to nothing. By midnight, the temperature fell below 0. The cold did not stop. By the second day, it was 18 below. By the third, 24 below. Wind tore through the settlement, piling snow 4 feet high against cabins. Drifts climbed to roof lines. Firewood disappeared beneath ice and snow. Green wood refused to burn. Chimneys clogged. Fires smoked and died. People burned furniture, fence posts, anything that would catch. Sarah's wood pile shrank fast. Even with careful rationing, the cabin lost heat. Ice formed on the inside of the windows. Frost crept across the walls. The water bucket froze within an hour. On the 8th night of the storm, The temperature inside the cabin dropped to 38 degrees, even with the fire going. Sarah made her choice. She banked the fire low, just enough to keep the chimney warm. She wrapped the children in every blanket she owned and led them down the ladder. Emma carried the oil lamp. Daniel clutched Sarah's skirt. When the trapdoor closed, the wind vanished. The underground room was quiet. The stone walls were dry. The air was still. Sarah checked the small thermometer she had hung there. It read 53 degrees. Outside, it was 26 below with wind. They stayed below. For 4 days, the storm raged. Sarah climbed up twice a day to tend the fire briefly. Each time, the cold shocked her breath away. She returned underground, shaking, then warmed again within minutes. They ate dried apples and cold cornbread. They told stories. They slept. The children did not cough. They did not shiver. Daniel slept through the nights. Emma read by lamplight without numb fingers. When the storm finally broke, the settlement began to dig out. That was when people noticed. Margaret Briggs came first, carrying a jar of broth. She expected desperation. Instead, she found Sarah calm, and the children playing quietly. The cabin felt warmer than her own. Margaret asked how much wood Sarah had burned. Sarah said, less than expected. Margaret's husband had frostbitten fingers. Her youngest child could barely walk from swollen feet. Sarah's children looked healthy. 2 days later, Jacob Stern, the carpenter who had laughed at Sarah's digging, came by. He stared at the thin smoke from her chimney. He asked how she made it through. Sarah told him they stayed below the wind. Understanding spread slowly, then all at once. Horace returned with questions. How deep? What stone? How did the air move? Sarah showed him everything. She explained simply. Earth held heat. Stone stored it. Wind never touched them. Within a week, other families began digging. The numbers could not be ignored. While others burned 2 or 3 cords of wood and still froze, Sarah used less than half a cord. Her underground room stayed warm when the world above went deadly cold. It was not magic. It was the ground doing what it always had. By late January, the pastor spoke of it in church, not as a miracle, as a lesson. Sometimes the simplest answers are the ones people overlook. Jacob apologized to Sarah in public. He said he was wrong. She nodded and said only that it worked for them. By spring, the secret bedroom was no longer a secret, and the settlement would never think about shelter the same way again. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. By the time February arrived, the idea had already taken root. 3 families near Bitterroot Creek had started digging beneath their cabins. Not because Sarah told them to, because they had seen the results with their own eyes. They had watched her children stay healthy, while others coughed through the nights. They had watched her woodpile last while theirs vanished, and they had felt the quiet shame of burning furniture just to survive. Jacob Stern was the first to finish his underground space. He followed Sarah's design almost exactly. Riverstone walls, dry stacked, packed with bark and needles, a narrow ladder, a hidden trap door beneath a rug. When his family slept there for the first time, his wife cried from relief. The room stayed warm without the fire roaring. The silence felt like safety. Margaret Briggs could not dig beneath her cabin. The foundation sat too shallow. Instead, she built a partially buried room against the north wall, sunk 3 feet into the earth with stone sides and a sod roof. It was not perfect, but it worked. Her children stopped waking with numb hands. The change spread quietly. No meetings, no announcements, just shovels hitting dirt. By the next winter, 7 families had some version of Sarah's idea. Some dug full rooms. Others built small sleeping spaces. A few combined them with root cellars, using the same space for food and shelter. Each design changed slightly based on soil, stone, and water. But the idea stayed the same. Let the earth do the work. The difference showed quickly. Firewood lasted longer. Chimneys cracked less. Fewer children got sick from smoke-filled cabins. Fewer people pushed their stoves past safety just to chase warmth. The settlement began to notice something else, too. They were calmer in winter, less desperate. Storms still came. Snow still buried the valley. But fear no longer ruled every cold night. Sarah never claimed credit. She answered questions when asked. She showed her room. She explained simply, 5 feet down, the earth does not change. Stone holds heat. Wind steals it. Stay below the wind. That was all. In the spring of 1889, a man from another settlement stopped by while passing through. He noticed the trap door and asked about it. Sarah explained. The man listened closely. He said his family struggled every winter. He asked if the idea could work where he lived. But Sarah told him the ground was the same everywhere. Only the digging was different. The idea traveled with him. By the early 1890s, similar underground sleeping spaces appeared in parts of Wyoming and the Dakotas. Some were dug deep. Others were half buried. Some used stone. Others used timber. The shape changed. The principle stayed. Agricultural agents began recommending partial earth sheltering for barns and workshops. Not because it was new, because it worked. Sarah's children grew up thinking it was normal to sleep below ground in winter. Emma later built a similar space beneath her own homestead in Idaho. Daniel became a stonemason. He used earth-sheltered designs in public buildings around Missoula, without ever calling it invention. To him, it was just good sense. Sarah remarried in 1894. But her new husband slept in the underground room without complaint. He said it was warmer than the house he grew up in. The room stayed. It was no longer a secret, just part of the cabin. Looking back, nothing Sarah did was revolutionary. People had lived underground for thousands of years. Pit houses, dugouts, earth-covered homes across the world. What Sarah did was remember something frontier life had started to forget. The ground is not an enemy. It is shelter. When everyone else built higher walls and burned more wood, she looked down. She trusted the earth beneath her feet. The result was not comfort. It was survival. A steady 55 degrees during the worst storm in 40 years. Half the firewood burned. Children who lived through winter without fear. Sarah Hutchkins never set out to change how people built, but she only wanted her children warm. But one quiet decision, made on a frozen night, shifted how an entire settlement understood shelter. Sometimes the smartest answers are not new. Sometimes they have been waiting beneath your feet the whole time.